The sun burned like molten gold across the Red Sea, glinting off the steel decks of the Al-Zahir, the Arab Navy's most advanced warship. Officers in crisp uniforms lined the rails, every salute sharp, every word measured, all except for the young woman who stood silently at the center of it all. Her name was Mira Qadiri, quiet, lean, her eyes dark as midnight sand, no rank on her shoulder, no badge, just a white linen blouse and a presence that made even the wind pause. The Admiral himself, Sheikh Admiral Tariq Al-Rashad, a man both feared and revered across the Gulf, stood before her. His reputation stretched from the Strait of Hormuz to the halls of the Pentagon, ruthless, brilliant, untouchable, and yet, his voice carried a hint of something unsteady when he said, "You don't belong here. This ship is not a place for civilians, especially not women of unverified background." The officers snickered. Mira didn't react. Her hands stayed clasped behind her back. "I was invited," she said simply. "By whom?" She looked up at him, calm, unwavering. "By the same man who saved your fleet 3 years ago." A hush rippled through ranks. Tariq's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. He died in the Sana'a ambush." She nodded once. "He did, but not before he gave me something to deliver to you." He frowned. "What could you possibly—" Before he could finish, Mira reached into her satchel and drew out a small, weathered notebook, the kind used by field operatives. The Admiral recognized it instantly. His late commander's seal was burned into the cover. The laughter died. The deck went silent. Tariq stepped forward slowly, taking the notebook from her trembling hands. His eyes scanned the first page, his own name written there, followed by a single line: "If she ever finds you, listen before you judge." Tariq looked up, confusion flickering into disbelief. "Who are you?" Mira's voice was soft, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "The one who never made it home from that mission." The Admiral's breath caught. "That's not possible. The only survivor was—" She nodded again. "The sniper, the one you left behind." Gasps echoed across the deck. Officers looked at one another, frozen between disbelief and fear. Tariq took a step closer, eyes narrowing. "That sniper was reported dead. The body was never recovered." Mira's tone turned to steel. "Bodies burn, records lie, but scars—" Her voice cracked as she reached for the hem of her blouse. "Scars don't—" And as she lifted her shirt, the light caught the jagged scars carved deep into her ribs. Surgical, brutal, unforgettable. The same wound pattern recorded in the mission files. The same marks the Admiral himself had signed off on when the body bag returned empty. The deck fell utterly silent. Every officer, every sailor, every gust of sea air stilled, and the man who commanded fleets, conquered wars, and bent men to his will stood speechless before the ghost he thought he'd buried. For a moment the world seemed to tilt, gulls circling above, waves slapping against the hull, sailors frozen mid-breath. Admiral Tariq Al-Rashad stared at the woman before him, the scarred evidence of an old war cutting through everything he thought he knew. He took a hesitant step forward, his voice quieter now. "Mira Qadiri. That name wasn't on any of the rosters. The woman who went missing in Aden. Her name was—" "Rima," she finished for him, eyes steady. "Rima Qadiri. My twin sister—" Gasps fluttered through the ranks again. Tariq's expression hardened. "Your twin? That's not possible. The intel reports were doctored," Mira cut in. "And the Admiral who signed them off never read past the first page." A flicker of shame crossed his face. She continued, her tone calm but edged like a blade. "You thought you lost your best sniper in that ambush. You didn't. You lost 2 soldiers that day, one by bullet, the other by betrayal." Tariq's breath hitched. "You're accusing me of treason?" "I'm accusing you," she said, stepping closer, "of letting a cover-up bury the truth." The sea wind hissed through the deck rigging as the officers looked away, uneasy. No one dared interrupt. Mira's eyes drifted past him to the horizon. 3 years ago, you ordered the Aden strike. My sister was your spotter. You promised extraction at dawn, but the chopper never came." Tariq's jaw clenched. "That operation was compromised. We received false coordinates." "False coordinates you approved," she interrupted again. I intercepted the original signal. You scrubbed it. Someone needed a failure that day, to hide something bigger. The Admiral's face darkened, but before he could speak, a voice came from the bridge. An older officer, Captain Hamdan, who'd served with Tariq for years. "Sir," he said softly, "the code embedded in that notebook. It's authentic. Commander Rima's handwriting. It's hers." A ripple of unease moved through the crew. Tariq turned sharply toward the captain. "Decrypt it." Hamdan hesitated, glancing toward Mira. "You might want to see this yourself, sir." He handed Tariq a tablet connected to the ship's decryption console. Lines of text flashed across the screen, coordinates, mission logs, encrypted communications, and at the bottom, one single phrase burned in red: he was on the other side. Tariq's hands went cold. "Who?" he whispered. Mira's voice was barely audible. "You know who?" He swallowed hard. "The arms broker?" She shook her head slowly. "No, Admiral. The one funding him." Her eyes met his, and something inside him shattered. Because she wasn't accusing him anymore. She was telling him, "Your brother," she said. The deck went utterly silent. Even the sea stopped breathing. The moment Mira uttered the words, "Your brother," the deck of the Al-Zahir might as well have vanished beneath them. Admiral Tariq Al-Rashad stood rigid, his grip on the railing white-knuckled, eyes wide in disbelief. Around him, his officers exchanged uncertain glances, the air heavy with something more dangerous than mutiny. "Truth. My brother?" Tariq repeated, his voice breaking between outrage and dread. "You mean Zahid?" Mira's expression didn't waver. "Zahid Al-Rashad, head of Al-Rashad Security Holdings. He was the one supplying both sides in Aden, arming the militia and the naval contractors. When your mission failed, the cover-up was a gift to his empire." Tariq shook his head. "No. Zahid funds charities, hospitals. Those hospitals," Mira interrupted, "were built near the same black sites used for weapons testing. My sister died protecting the evidence. The scars you just saw," she took a breath, steady, "came from one of his blasts." The Admiral's gaze faltered. His mind reeled back through years of half-truths and excuses. Zahid's vague reports, the untraceable shipments, the political favors that had come too easily. Captain Hamdan, his voice hushed, murmured, "Sir, the intercepted logs she brought, they match Zahid's coded shipments. I've seen his encryption style before." Tariq turned toward him sharply. "You're saying my own blood used your command to bury his crimes," Mira finished. For the first time in decades, Tariq felt small, not as an admiral, but as a man who had built his honor on a lie he never questioned. The crew stood frozen, waiting. Mira's tone softened, though her eyes stayed like steel. "He needed your signature to authorize the Sanaa drop. You gave it without knowing what was inside that crate." "My sister did, and when she tried to stop it, she was marked expendable." The sea wind lashed through the deck, scattering papers, flapping flags. Somewhere below, the engines hummed, the ship's heartbeat, steady even as its captains faltered. Tariq took a slow step closer to her. "If what you say is true, why come back now?" Mira met his gaze without fear. "Because your brother's ships are still moving through the Gulf. He's preparing another transfer, and this time, it won't just be a skirmish. He's selling chaos." The Admiral's silence stretched until even the waves seemed to listen. Then he said, almost to himself, "All my life, I thought loyalty meant protecting family." "It does," Mira said quietly, "until your family stops protecting what's right." A deep, commanding voice broke through the tension. Captain Hamdan again. "Sir, Zahid's yacht Nadir 1 just pinged our radar, approaching the neutral zone." Tariq's head snapped toward the radar screen. His brother's vessel, sleek, black, and unregistered, moving fast across the blue. He turned back to Mira. "If he's really behind this, I'll see it with my own eyes." She nodded once. "Then let me come with you. He'll never confess to you, but he will to me." For the first time that day, the Admiral gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Then may God forgive us both," he said, "for what's about to happen." The sea stretched black and endless as night fell over the Gulf. Under the floodlights of the Al-Zahir, Admiral Tariq Al-Rashad stood on the bridge, his face half lit by radar glow, half shadowed by guilt. Ahead, the Nadir 1, his brother's private vessel, sliced through the waves, closing distance like a predator. "Maintain course," he ordered, voice low but trembling beneath its steel. Mira stood beside him, still in her field jacket, her hand clutching a silver locket. Her sister's. Inside it lay a blood-stained ship drive, the evidence Zahid had once killed to suppress. As the ships neared, the air crackled with unspoken tension. On the Admiral's command, the Al-Zahir's engines slowed to idle. Searchlights swung toward the Nadir -1, bathing it in gold and white. Moments later, a voice came through the comms, smooth, deep, chillingly familiar. "Brother, I see you've brought guests." Mira froze. Even through static, the arrogance in Zahid al-Rashad's voice was unmistakable. The same tone from those secret war briefings years ago. The same man who'd smiled as others bled. Tariq exhaled slowly. "Permission to board, Zahid." A soft laugh replied. "Permission? You've forgotten your place, Admiral. The ocean isn't yours to command anymore." That was all Tariq needed to hear. "Prepare boarding team," he said sharply. "We go in quiet." Minutes later, a small tactical skiff cut across the waves toward the Nadir -1. Salt spray hit Mira's face, but she didn't flinch. She had waited years for this, to face the man who'd stolen her sister's life and buried her truth. When they climbed aboard, Zahid was waiting. He stood at the center of his yacht's glass-paneled deck, dressed in ivory linen, a drink in hand, eyes gleaming like oil in moonlight. "My little brother, the war hero," Zahid said with a smirk, "and the girl who survived what she shouldn't have. What a reunion." Tariq's jaw tightened. "Enough lies. You've used our name to arm murderers." Zahid took a slow sip of his drink. "Used? No, brother. I built something that even empires respect. While you polished metals, I funded governments. Every bullet, every drone, all through us. You think your admiralty matters to the world? It's a relic." Mira stepped forward, fury burning behind her calm. "And my sister's blood was part of your funding, wasn't it?" Zahid's smirk flickered, just for a second, before returning. "Collateral," he said coldly. Tariq's fist clenched. "Say that again. Collateral. The world runs on it." Mira pulled out the locket, opened it, and tossed the chip drive at Zahid's feet. "Then explain this to the Court of the United Nations. Every transaction, every falsified shipment, all here." Zahid stared at it, and for the first time his composure cracked. "You think they'll believe a deserter and a dying admiral?" But Tariq wasn't the same man who once worshipped loyalty. He straightened his coat, took a step forward, and said quietly, "They'll believe an Al-Rashad who finally stopped lying." He pressed a button on, his wrist calm. Live broadcast. Every word, every confession streamed directly to military command. Zahid's eyes widened. "You!" Gunfire shattered the silence. One of Zahid's guards raised his weapon, but Mira moved faster. A swift disarm, a clean takedown, the guard's weapon sliding across the deck. Tariq shouted, "Stand down!" But Zahid's men hesitated only for a moment before surrendering, seeing the naval drones now circling above the yacht. Tariq looked at his brother, bleeding pride in his eyes, trembling with disbelief. "You were my blood. I would have followed you anywhere. But you made our name a curse," Zahid sneered, "and you made it weak." The Admiral stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then let history decide which of us it remembers." He turned away as the naval patrol closed in. Zahid's empire was done. Mira looked at Tariq, not with triumph, but with something sadder. "Justice doesn't feel like victory." Tariq nodded. "No, it feels like truth, and truth always costs blood." As the sun broke the horizon, Zahid al-Rashad was led away in chains, and for the first time in years the Admiral looked out over the water and felt something close to peace. The courtroom in Geneva wasn't built for people like her. Marble columns, golden insignias, and the slow hum of translators' whispers filled the air as Mira al-Haytham took her seat before the tribunal. Behind her, cameras clicked, the world watching a soldier without a flag, a woman without a rank who had just shattered an empire. Across the aisle sat Zahid al-Rashad, restrained but smirking. He looked untouched, like the handcuffs were jewelry. His lawyers, a row of elite defense experts, whispered in 5 languages. At the front table sat Admiral Tariq Al-Rashad, his posture straight, his uniform gleaming but his face carved with exhaustion. The presiding judge, a silver-haired woman from Norway, cleared her throat. This tribunal will determine whether Zahid al-Rashad's corporation, Rashad Dynamics, knowingly sold restricted weapons to private warlords under the guise of reconstruction aid. Mira glanced at the display screen. Images of destroyed villages flickered by, each bearing the same watermark, Rashad Dynamics Logistics Division. Zahid leaned forward, smiling faintly at her. "They'll all forget in a week," he whispered, his voice low but venomous. "Do you know why? Because nations need monsters like me." Mira didn't reply. She reached into her coat pocket, brushing against the locket, her sister's. Inside, the final recording remained, one she hadn't dared play aloud. Until now, when the court granted her the floor, Mira stood. Her English was calm, clear, almost too steady for what she was about to do. "My name is Mira Al-Haytham. I was a sniper in the Joint Arabian-European Peace Force, but my sister, Lieutenant Dalia Al-Haytham, worked for Rashad Dynamics. When she uncovered the company's secret arms routes to militia groups, she was killed in a warehouse accident." She paused, her fingers tightening around the locket. "That's what the report said." Then she opened it, revealing a tiny projection disc. She placed it on the table. A hologram flickered to life, her sister's face, pale, trembling, recorded just hours before her death. "If you're seeing this, Mira, it means I found something terrible. They're moving the weapons through the humanitarian convoys. Zahid al-Rashad knows. Tariq might not, but he—" The video glitched. The courtroom fell silent. Even Tariq's breath caught. For years he had believed his brother's guilt was just rumor, but this was a confession from beyond the grave. Zahid's lawyers tried to object, but the judge's gavel struck like thunder. Silence in the chamber. The projection ended, and Mira's voice, raw now, broke the stillness. "You told the world you were rebuilding nations. You were burning them." Zahid's composure cracked. He slammed his hands on the table, chains rattling. "You think this will stop the war? You think your little show of justice changes anything? You'll beg for my networks when your borders fall apart." Tariq rose. His voice, low and trembling with grief, echoed through the hall. "The only thing that falls today is your shadow." The tribunal erupted. The judge ordered recess as cameras flashed, headlines igniting across the world. Later, in a quiet corridor lined with flags, Mira found Tariq staring out at the lake. He didn't look like an admiral anymore, just a man carrying too much history. "You did what I couldn't," he said softly. "You forced the world to see us." Mira smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for the world." He nodded. "I know. You did it for the dead." Outside, reporters shouted questions, and security lights blinked red against the night. But as Mira stepped out of the building, the wind carried the faint sound of a helicopter overhead, one that wasn't on the flight schedule. Her instincts sharpened. Someone wasn't done with this story. The night over Lake Geneva was cold and sharp. Wind tore through the flagpoles outside the tribunal as Mira Al-Haytham stepped into the courtyard, her coat whipping behind her. The media lights had dimmed, the crowd dispersed, but her instincts buzzed. Someone was still watching. She paused near the fountain. Reflected in its dark water were 3 red dots, sniper optics, gliding across the marble steps like lazy fireflies. Mira didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered into her comm, "Tariq, it's not over. They're here." Static. Then the faint reply, "I see them. Move to extraction point Bravo, now." She slipped into the alley between the courthouse and the Swiss defense wing, boots soundless against the cobblestones. Her mind was sharp, cold, soldier mode. But when she turned the corner, a black SUV screeched to a halt in front of her. 2 men in civilian suits stepped out, tall, military posture, Middle Eastern accents buried beneath practiced English. The taller one spoke first. "Mira Al-Haytham, you're coming with us." She raised an eyebrow. "Under whose authority?" "The Al-Majid Security Directorate," he said evenly. "You're being summoned by His Highness Sheikh Rafiq Al-Majid." The name hit her like a cold slap. Rafiq Al-Majid. the Arab billionaire defense magnate who once bankrolled both Rashad Dynamics and the United Peace Forces. Her pulse steadied. This wasn't a rescue, it was a recall. Was theater, Rafiq interrupted. To keep the public entertained while we rewrite the next decade of power. Silence. The helicopter blades thundered above them. Mira stared at him. Why tell me this? He smiled, slow and deliberate. Because you broke the chain, Mira. You made the world look. Now they'll try to erase you. I can protect you. If you protect me. Her jaw tightened. You mean, if I work for you? No, he said softly. If you replace Zahid. Her stomach turned cold. The same man she fought to destroy was now offering her his throne. Before she could respond, Rafiq's phone buzzed. He looked down, expression tightening. Ah, seems we're being followed. A missile lock warning screamed through the cockpit. Hold on, the pilot shouted. Mira grabbed the seat harness just as a white flash erupted outside. A pursuing fighter jet streaking across the clouds. Who's firing on us? She yelled. Rafiq's calm smile returned, even as alarms blared. Your admiral friend, perhaps, or the people he just tried to expose. The helicopter jolted hard, flames licking the side windows, and through the chaos Mira realized the war wasn't between nations anymore. It was between truth and survival. The sky burned around them. Fire streaked the clouds as the helicopter spiraled downward, alarms screaming, shards of molten glass cutting through the cabin, air like razors. Mira clutched her harness, her world turning upside down. Beside her, Sheikh Rafiq al-Majid stayed eerily calm, like a man who'd already planned how he'd survive the end. Brace, the pilot shouted. A deafening crash. The chopper slammed into the Syrian coast, skidding across the dunes, tearing through dry earth before finally splitting apart in a storm of dust and metal. Then, silence. Only the soft hiss of leaking fuel and the roar of the sea. And if I refuse? She asked. The man smiled faintly. Then the sheikh will send someone less polite. Before she could answer, a distant roar filled the night, the heavy drone of military-grade rotors. A stealth helicopter descended over the lake, wind flattening the flags, water erupting into mist. From the shadows behind her, Admiral Tariq emerged with 2 naval escorts. His eyes, tired but burning with resolve, locked onto her. Mira, go with them. This goes beyond Zahid. Rafiq runs the entire syndicate. If he wants to talk, we need to hear him. She stared at him in disbelief. You trust him? No. But I trust that he's scared. And that means leverage. With one last look at the courthouse, Mira stepped into the SUV. In the air, hours later, the helicopter flew low over the Mediterranean, its cabin lined with cream leather and silent guards. Across from her sat Sheikh Rafiq al-Majid, impeccably dressed, silver hair slicked back, his keffiyeh trimmed in gold thread. He looked at her like a professor studying a dangerous artifact. I watched your tribunal performance, he said, voice deep, precise. You are brave and reckless, both qualities I value and punish. Mira crossed her arms. You didn't summon me to flatter or threaten. You want something. Rafiq smiled faintly. Smart, good. Then we can speak openly. He leaned forward, eyes cold as winter. You think Zahid al-Rashad was the architect of this empire? He was a pawn. The contracts, the funding, the wars, all sanctioned under the Eclipse Accord. Mira frowned. That doesn't exist. Of course it doesn't. Publicly. But you've already touched its surface. Every government that bought peace from Zahid's chaos signed under Eclipse, including the West. Her breath caught. You're saying the tribunal? Mira's ears rang. Her ribs screamed with pain, but she forced herself upright, crawling through the smoke. The night sky above was shattered with embers. She dragged Rafiq out from under the wreckage, his arm bleeding, but his eyes open and sharp. You should have died in that, she muttered. He coughed, smirking. I've survived worse. Death doesn't take men who still owe him debts. She looked toward the horizon. No city lights, no signal. Just the black desert stretching endlessly, and the faint hum of approaching engines. We're not alone, she said quietly. Rafiq nodded, brushing sand off his robe. No, we're not. Those are my men. Moments later, black armored SUVs appeared out of the darkness, headlights cutting through dust. Men with rifles surrounded the wreckage, speaking rapid Arabic into comms. Rafiq raised a hand. Stand down. She's with me. Mira glared at him. You think I'm staying here after that stunt? He looked at her, eyes glinting like obsidian. You don't have a choice, soldier. The people who fired that missile will kill us both if they find us first. And believe me, when billionaires fear exposure, even generals vanish overnight. They drove in silence for hours through the desert, the horizon slowly glowing with dawn. The convoy finally stopped before a vast underground structure, hidden under the dunes lit by blue floodlights. It wasn't just a base, it was a fortress, a secret hub of Rafiq's empire. Inside, corridors hummed with technology, servers, and maps spanning the world. Mira's sharp eyes caught one detail: digital pins marking conflict zones, all with the same emblem, Eclipse. This is what you built instead of peace, she said coldly. Rafiq walked beside her, favoring his wounded arm but still composed. No. This is what keeps peace possible. Balance, Mira. The world feeds on fear. I just make sure it doesn't starve. She turned toward him. You talk like a philosopher, but you sell chaos. He stopped, meeting her gaze. You think soldiers don't? Every sniper, every drone operator, all paid by men like me. You're angry at the mirror, not the man. Her jaw tightened. You murdered my sister. No, he said softly. Zahid did. But I funded the stage. Mira's eyes flashed. That makes you worse. Rafiq smiled faintly. It makes me necessary. He led her into a private chamber, a long table with 2 seats and a single device at its center, a biometric data console. This, Rafiq said, is the Eclipse Protocol Core, the full archive of every secret deal, every signed weapon transfer, every covert alliance on Earth. And it's dying. He typed a sequence. The holographic map flickered, glitching red. Someone inside the Accord is purging the data to hide their hands. If it's lost, the world resets, and war will restart on every front. Mira frowned. You want me to help you save it? No, he said quietly. I want you to help me expose it. Because I'm not long for this world, and you're the only one ruthless enough to finish what your sister started. For a long moment she said nothing. The desert wind howled through the vents, carrying the scent of sand and blood. Then she whispered, Why me? Rafiq smiled, eyes dim but sincere for once. Because, Mira Al-Haytham, you're the first soldier I've ever met who fights for truth, not permission. He handed her the access key, a crystal data shard, and at that exact second, the facility alarms blared red. A guard ran in, panic in his voice. Sheikh, hostile drones inbound, they've found us. Rafiq turned toward Mira, his face deadly calm. It seems our time is shorter than I thought. Outside, explosions thundered across the dunes, lighting up the desert night. And as the walls shook, Mira clutched the shard, realizing this wasn't just evidence anymore. It was the fuse to end every war built on lies. The first blast tore through the upper deck of the fortress like thunder-splitting stone. Dust rained from the ceiling, alarms screamed in every corridor, and Mira's instincts snapped alive. She spun toward Rafiq. You said this place was off-grid. The sheik wiped blood from his lip, his composure breaking for the first time. It was, which means someone inside my council betrayed me. A second explosion shook the chamber, closer, sharper. The screens along the walls flickered red with alert codes. System breach. External override detected. From the security feed, Mira saw armored soldiers in unmarked gear descending ropes from stealth drones. A mercenary unit, moving with surgical precision. They're not Rashad's men, she muttered. These are NATO Black Ops. Rafiq turned sharply. No insignias, no colors. They don't represent a nation. They represent Eclipse itself. Mira grabbed a rifle from the weapons rack, checked the chamber. Then let's see if the ghosts of your empire can bleed. In the corridors below, the underground complex erupted in chaos. Guards shouted in Arabic. Gunfire echoed through the tunnels, and smoke poured from the northern ventilation shafts. Mira led the survivors, 10 men, frightened but loyal, through the narrow passageways, her movements quick and silent. Cut the eastern lights, she ordered. Make them fight blind. One guard hesitated. But madam, we'll see better in the dark than they ever will, she snapped. The lights flickered off. Shadows swallowed the hallways. Mira crouched near a junction, watching the laser dots of enemy scopes flick across the far wall. When the first soldier turned the corner, she fired, one clean shot to the helmet. The second fell before he could shout. Her men followed, silent and precise. Every move was a symphony of survival, the sound of vengeance, discipline, and purpose. Control room. Minutes later, Rafiq sat before the central console, his wounded hand trembling as he typed code into the holographic interface. "I can transfer the Eclipse data to an encrypted satellite, but I need 3 more minutes," he said. Mira's voice crackled over the radio. "You have 2. She burst into the room seconds later, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. "We've lost the East Wing. They're flooding in." Rafiq looked up at her. No fear now, only grim resolve. "Mira, take the shard. If I fall, it's your burden now." "Not a chance," she growled. "We're both walking out of here." Before he could reply, the glass wall shattered. A missile slammed into the command center. Mira tackled him down as fire roared across the room. When she lifted her head, her ears ringing, 5 soldiers stormed through the breach. "Drop your weapons," one shouted. Mira's eyes flicked to the control terminal. 99% upload complete. She stood slowly, hands raised, and then in a blur, threw a flash grenade. The room exploded in white light. She moved through the chaos like a ghost. 2, 3, 4, 5 down before the smoke cleared. Rafiq stared at her, almost in disbelief. "You were never just a sniper," he murmured. She reloaded, breathing hard. "No, I was the thing the world created, and forgot." The final upload pinged. "Transfer complete." Rafiq slumped back, blood pooling under his hand. "It's done. The truth's out there now. Sent to every major broadcast node. They can't bury it anymore." Mira knelt beside him, checking the wound. "You'll live." He gave a faint, pained smile. "You don't believe that." The ceiling above them groaned. The fortress was collapsing. Rafiq grabbed her wrist. "Listen to me. The Eclipse Accord is global. You can't destroy it alone, but you can guide what replaces it." Mira shook her head. "I'm not interested in power." "Then be interested in what happens to the powerless," he whispered. With that, the floor split, concrete cracking, fire blazing. Mira dragged him toward the exit, the air thick with smoke and sand. Outside, the desert sky glowed orange, and in the distance, the faint hum of approaching helicopters. "Rescue?" Rafiq coughed. "Maybe," Mira said. "Or another execution." As the fortress crumbled behind them, Mira turned once, watching centuries of greed burn into dust. She didn't smile, she didn't mourn, she just whispered, "Rest, sister. The world finally knows." The sun rose over the desert like an open wound. Black smoke climbed from what was once Rafiq's hidden fortress, twisting toward the heavens. Beside the wreckage, Mira Al-Haytham stood with the sand clinging to her boots, the Eclipse shard pressed tightly in her palm. Rafiq lay against a rock, his breathing shallow, his eyes clouded but sharp. "You should go," he rasped. "Before they find you." Mira looked at the horizon. In the distance, the faint shimmer of helicopters grew louder. Too late. Rafiq managed a dry laugh. "You were always too brave to run." She crouched beside him. "You said you sent the data to every broadcast node." "I did," he whispered. "But the world doesn't care about truth until it bleeds. They'll rewrite it, twist it, bury it under fear again." Mira frowned. "Then I'll make them remember." He smiled faintly. "You sound like her." "My sister?" "Yes," he said, closing his eyes. "She believed the world could be cleansed by honesty. I believed it could only be managed by lies. Turns out, we were both wrong." The roar of engines drowned his final breath. When Mira looked up, the first helicopter appeared, military gray, bearing no flag. Minutes later, the desert was surrounded. Mira raised her hands as soldiers fanned out, their uniforms a mix of NATO, Arabian, and corporate insignias. A tall man stepped forward. Director Ilyas Ward, head of Global Counterintelligence, the same man who'd once signed Mira's discharge papers. "Mira Al-Haytham," he said coolly, "you've just ignited the largest intelligence scandal in modern history. Do you have any idea what you've done?" She looked him dead in the eye. "Yes, I told the truth." His jaw tightened. You've destabilized alliances, exposed covert funding, endangered billions in trade. You've made enemies of everyone. Then they were never allies, she shot back. Ward nodded slowly. That's exactly why we can't let you live. The soldiers aimed their rifles, but before the command came, the air above them split with the roar of another aircraft, a private jet, sleek, black, bearing the golden crest of House Al-Rashad, swooped low over the dunes. Ward shouted into his radio, who authorized. Too late. A rope ladder dropped from the jet's undercarriage. From the cockpit window, Admiral Tariq Al-Rashad waved once. Mira, move. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward the ladder as bullets tore through the sand around her. She leapt, grabbed the rope and climbed, the heat from the gunfire searing the air beneath her. The jet banked hard, rising into the orange dawn. Below, the desert burned, in the sky. Later, Tariq sat across from her in the cabin, exhaustion etched into his face. You've started a storm no one can contain, he said quietly. The world's governments are in blackout mode. Rafiq's data broke everything. Mira stared out the window, the desert shrinking beneath them. Maybe it's time someone rebuilt it. Tariq studied her. You know what they're calling you? What? The Phantom Sniper. The woman who ended Eclipse. She gave a faint smile. Then they should know Eclipse isn't over yet. He frowned. What do you mean? She pulled the shard from her pocket. This isn't the full archive. Rafiq only sent half. The rest is locked behind a dead man's code, and I intend to find it. Tariq exhaled slowly. You're going back into the storm. No, she said. I'm going above it. She turned to the cockpit, eyes set on the horizon where the sun met the clouds. The world might have branded her a fugitive, a traitor, a ghost, but she had something none of them did: clarity. As the jet climbed higher, Mira whispered to herself, half a promise, half a warning. If truth is a war, then I'm done fighting. I'm starting a revolution. And somewhere, buried deep within the ruins below, a red light blinked back to life. Eclipse system, reboot sequence initiated. The war wasn't over. It had just evolved. The world trembled beneath a new kind of chaos. Governments scrambled to contain what Mira Al-Haytham had unleashed. The Eclipse leaks spread like wildfire, exposing every covert deal, every puppet alliance, every dark fund that shaped wars for profit. And in every news cycle, one name returned like a haunting refrain: the Phantom Sniper. But Mira was gone. 6 months later, Istanbul. Rain glazed the skyline like smoke. On the terrace of an abandoned consulate, Tariq Al-Rashad stood staring at the Bosphorus lights. He wasn't in uniform anymore. His medals had been stripped, his name erased from the registry. Behind him, a figure emerged from the mist. You shouldn't have come, Mira said, her voice low but steady. He turned. You left without a word. Because I had to vanish before they turned me into a symbol, she replied. Symbols get worshipped, and then they get destroyed. He studied her face. And what are you now? She smiled faintly. Something they can't define. From her coat pocket she handed him a small drive, etched with the same golden crest as her father's insignia. The second half of the Eclipse archive, she said. Everything Rafiq hid from the world. Names, codes, networks. The rest of the rot. Tariq's eyes widened. If this gets out— It won't, she interrupted. Not yet. The world needs to want truth first. Otherwise, it'll just kill itself faster. He took a step closer. Then what's your plan? To make them listen, she said. Quietly. Her gaze drifted toward the water. Do you know what silence is, Tariq? It's not peace. It's the pause before history changes its course. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, with slow respect, he placed his hand over his heart and bowed. You're not just a soldier anymore, Mira. You're a revolution. Later, somewhere over the Arabian Gulf, a private broadcast cut across encrypted networks. A woman's voice, calm and unmistakable. This is Mira Al-Haytham. I am not your enemy. I am not your savior. But the truth belongs to no empire, no billionaire, no soldier. If you can hear my voice, it means the system still breathes. And that means it can still change, then static, then silence. The signal ended as quietly as it began, but within hours, social channels around the globe pulsed with a new phrase written in a dozen languages. The silent revolution in DDR face, no country, no leader, just a movement. And somewhere in the endless desert, a lone rider crossed the dunes, the wind carrying her words toward the horizon. Mira al-Haytham had become a ghost, a whisper, a story mothers told their children, of a woman who fought billionaires, generals, and governments not with bullets, but with truth. In a world where power speaks the loudest, silence can still shake the ground. Courage isn't always the roar of defiance. Sometimes, it's the quiet refusal to obey the lie. Mira didn't win her war by force. She won it by being unbreakable when the truth demanded a voice. And that's what makes legends, not their victories, but their convictions.